Hello, hello. Happy Monday to you all. Hello, friends and family. Today is a good day to kick off the fair housing um, series that we're doing because during the month of April, it is National Fair Housing Month. And so if you have been following me, you know that this is something that I've been talking about that we were going to discuss. And so now we are here. Can you believe we are already in the fourth month of the year? Time has really been flying. I promise you that time waits for no one. All right, so first thing on the list, let me just do the brief introduction. I am Karissa Spann. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, thank you so much for joining me today. If you are, if this is your first time joining me, if you will, let me know where you're watching from, which jurisdiction, which state, which city you're in, because I love to know where my viewers are tuned in from so that I can provide information for you. All right. So whether you're watching the live or the replay, let me just say thank you so much for just joining me today. This information that I'm sharing today is for landlords and for tenants. So if you are a landlord, if you're a tenant, or maybe you know someone who is, please tell them to tune in right now. I'm live on Facebook and YouTube. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have questions, if you have comments, go ahead and drop it in the comment box. I promise that I will get to each and every one of your questions or your comments. But I'm going to share some great nuggets on today because I thought it would be helpful to share this information to prevent landlords from being in the hot seat. Okay. And many of you know that my philosophy is very simple. All right. My philosophy is this: if you treat it like a business, it will pay you like a business. If you treat it like a hobby, well, it's going to pay you like a hobby. But here's the thing: when it comes to fair housing laws, sometimes um, things happen and landlords and housing providers are not necessarily aware of. All right. And so, just a brief example of what that means. Sometimes, when it comes to fair housing laws, um, fair housing laws are set up in a way that landlords may not know that they are violating tenant rights. So we're going to get into the discussion today, and I hope to share information that will be helpful for you or for someone that you know. So if you're watching on Facebook, please like my Facebook page. If you're tuning in on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay. I want to make sure that I'm able to provide you information and that you're able to stay connected. But more importantly, I want to make sure that you can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook and YouTube each and every Monday, right here at 7:30 p.m. So this is what I do each and every Monday. Listen, it costs you absolutely nothing to show up to get this information. So if you're a landlord, it's always in your best interest to make time to give yourself that reminder, put it on your calendar, set that alarm clock that every Monday at 7:30 that you are tuning in to hear information that I'm sharing, because I'm always going to give information that's going to help you as landlords as well as tenants. All right. So if you're a landlord, you have a rental property business, you're a property manager, you're a real estate investor, whatever capacity you're working in real estate, listen, information, you want to stay abreast of information laws as they are changing, as well as tenants, because tenants have rights. All right. So as a landlord and tenant coach, I am passionate about sharing this information. Okay. All right. So give me one moment. I just want to make sure that I'm live on all of my platforms. Give me 1 second, guys. And I promise I won't hold you long today, but I will hold you long enough to share the information that I know is going to be helpful to so many of you. All right. So if something that I say you agree with or you like, go ahead and hit that like button. Go ahead and share this information, because sharing is caring. Can you agree with me on that? That sharing is caring. All right. So give me 1 second. Let me make sure I'm live on all of my platforms. Excuse me. All right. So, and then also let me turn my ringer off, because, last week I got a call in the middle of the broadcast. Like, people know that I'm live. Why would they call me? But anyway, let me just make sure that I'm live. Give me 1 second, guys. Thank you so much for your patience. Just want to make sure that people are getting this information today. Okay, so here we are. All right, here we go. So April is National Fair Housing Month. All right. Hello, Valerie. Thank you so much, birthday lady. Happy birthday, Val. I know you turned 27 again. I know you're feeling young. Hope that your birthday was great and fabulous. Hello, Lauren. Hello, Sissy. Thank you so much for tuning in from Brooklyn, New York. So we have DC in the building. We have New York in the building. Thank you so much, guys. So April is National Fair Housing Month. So let me just say this, that fair housing laws are in place throughout the United States. It doesn't matter if you're in DC, doesn't matter if you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, New York, Arkansas, or Hawaii, doesn't matter. All right. Fair housing laws are in place nationwide. Nobody's exempt from the law. All right. I know that in many cases, a lot of people believe that money is power, but I promise you that when it comes to fair housing laws, you better have enough money to have a good attorney, because tenants do have rights and tenants can file complaints. So I'm going to get into the discussion today. I want this to be interactive. Val, I know you may remember some of this information. And let me just thank my students who are tuning in. In addition to being a landlord and tenant coach, I'm also a property manager. I'm also a college professor. I teach property management at one of the local universities in my area. And information and teaching and sharing is something that I'm absolutely passionate about. All right. So the purpose of today's session throughout the month of April really is to help, like I said, landlords and tenants just navigate the information, the laws, and understanding what's what. All right. So first thing I'm going to get into is, what is fair housing? Now, before I bring it up on the screen, I just want to know if anybody know what a fair housing law is. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Throw it in the comment section, whether you're Facebook or YouTube. Can you tell me what you think fair housing law is? All right. So Val, you turned a big 5-6. That's exciting. Okay, so can anybody tell me, does anybody want to take a stab at it or guess what fair housing laws are, what it's for, anything that you may have heard or think you know about fair housing laws? All right, so Val, I know that you know this information, so I'm not going to ask you to share it, Val. All right, so let me bring it up on the screen. All right, we're talking about fair housing laws, right? So the Fair Housing Act came about in 1968, and it was created to prevent housing discrimination. All right. So that simply means that landlords, housing providers must treat everyone the same. Now, here's the thing. With fair housing laws, it doesn't just apply for rental housing. All right. It also applies to real estate sales. Okay. But for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to keep it strictly to landlords, because that's what this discussion is about, landlords and tenants. All right. So in a nutshell, the Fair Housing Act of 1968 came along with the Civil Rights Act. Okay. And it came pretty much at a time that it was so needed. So let me see your comment. Hey, Pete, happy Monday. Thank you for tuning in, Pete. You said it protects people from discrimination. Absolutely. All right. Sissy, you says it's a right to not be discriminated, race, disability. That's good. All right. Hello, Kim. Thank you so much for tuning in from South Carolina. You said protect the protective classes. Okay, that's good. Okay, Val, you said as soon as you said it, I remembered. All right, well, Val, I'm glad to jog your memory, bring it back to your remembrance. Okay, so the Fair Housing Act of 1968, it was created to prevent housing discrimination. All right, that's the biggest thing I want you to remember about fair housing laws. So again, you have to treat everybody the same, whether you're working in the profession of property management, you're a landlord, you're an owner, or you're thinking about getting into real estate and getting yourself some rental property, and maybe one day you're going to have tenants. You want to remember this information that I'm sharing today. So with fair housing laws, all right, the National fair housing law, right? There are seven protected classes. However, just depending on the state and the jurisdiction, it could be more. All right. So, Sissy, you're tuning in from from New York. So there are seven protected federal protected classes. All right. But in addition to that, New York may have other protected classes as well. DC, South Carolina, North Carolina may have other protected classes added onto those seven protected classes. So for today's discussion, I'm going to share the seven protected classes and I'll follow up. So if you're in a jurisdiction and you say, well, Karissa, can you let me know what additional classes, what are some other protected classes for that particular jurisdiction? Just inbox me and I will definitely get you that information. All right, so here it is. Here are the seven protected classes: race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, and national origin. Those are the seven protected classes. Nobody can discriminate against people who fall under that category when it comes to housing. All right. So the first thing that we're going to discuss on today is race. All right. So when it comes to race, here's what I want you to know. It's pretty much ethnicity, whether a person is Black or white, maybe they're Native American or multiracial, So that means that a landlord cannot discriminate or prevent somebody from getting housing because they are Black, because they're African American, or because they're Caucasian, or because they're Asian, right? Landlords cannot discriminate. And I know that it happens all the time. It happens so frequently that in many cases, people think that it's normal. It's not normal. It's not okay to discriminate. Now, many of you know that we are in the United States. We are seeing a lot of discrimination and a lot of things that are happening. But just because it's happening does not mean that it's lawful. So here's the thing. We are still in the midst of the national pandemic, right? So COVID-19 hit. It hit hard. 2020 was a brutal year for so many of us. I personally I lost 5 loved ones strictly to COVID. Then at the end of the year in December, my father unexpectedly passed away, but he didn't pass from COVID. So 2020 was a brutal year. So now we're in 2021 and we're still in the national pandemic. And here's the thing, guys. I know that I've said that a tsunami of evictions are going to be coming for non-payment of rent for tenants who are not paying rent. But then there are also going to be a tsunami of filed complaints against landlords because they have violated fair housing laws. I promise you that there's going to be a wave. It's going to be a nightmare for so many people. So mark my words, on this day, April the 5th, 2021, I said it. Yes, I said it, that there are going to be so many landlords that are going to be hit hard because they have violated fair housing laws. So take this information that I'm sharing, try to prevent yourself from being in the hot seat. All right. So we talked about race. Now we want to talk about the second thing, which is color. Sometimes people discriminate because of the color of their skin. So some people don't like dark people, or for instance, they may not like fair colored people, right? Maybe they only want light complexion. That's discrimination to say that they only want light-skinned people. They may say, oh, well, yeah, I like Black people. I like African Americans. I just don't like the really dark ones. That's still discrimination. And so I know they think that they're not discriminated by saying, yes, I will rent to an African American. But if you say you're going to rent to an African American, then regardless of the color of the skin, they're all basically African Americans, right? So I want people to really understand the dynamics of what's happening behind the scene, because I've heard it. I have colleagues. I've been in the industry in property management for well over 28 years. And sometimes the conversations that I engage with my colleagues, they think they're saying and doing the right thing when they really are not. And so I know that some of them are tuned in. And I just want to say thank you so much. Listen to the information that I'm sharing today that will ultimately help you run your business like a business, because it's nothing worse than running a business thinking you're doing the right thing. And then all of a sudden you get a suit filed against you. You get a complaint filed because something happened and you're not even aware of it, right? So we already know that what we don't know can or will hurt us, right? And so sometimes landlords, housing providers are not aware that they are discriminated. Now, here's the thing. Nothing stops a tenant or a tenant advocacy group, an attorney, whoever, from filing a complaint against a landlord. There's nothing that stops them. And sometimes landlords and housing providers, they think that, and I've heard them say, well, Karissa, it wasn't intentional. I didn't intentionally discriminate, but it doesn't matter. The law doesn't say that you have to be found guilty of intentionally discriminating. So you have to know what the law says so that you're not guilty, whether intentional or not. Don't let your good deeds get you in trouble because you don't know the law. All right. So, Pete, you said that's right. Don't sleep on it. I promise you. That's some good advice, Pete. There is a storm coming. You're absolutely right. I definitely agree. And Pete, you said 2021 and that's still going on. Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, discrimination is still here. Discrimination has never stopped. It never left. It's just the nature of people. People have a preference who they want. They have a preference. They have this idea that a certain class of people are going to act a particular way, or maybe they're just intimidated, whatever, right? Whatever the reason is, whatever the cause is, if it's discrimination, if it's against the law, just please stop doing it. That's really the safe way to keep yourself from out of the hot seat. So how do you discriminate by accident? That is a good question, Pete. I'm so glad that you asked. How do you discriminate by accident? All right. So I just gave this scenario. I gave the example where I said maybe there's a housing provider or a landlord who said, we'll rent to African Americans. But maybe they have this complex about dark-skinned African American males, Black brothers that may have maybe they have dreads and maybe their pants are sagging, right? And maybe they just have this stereotype of what happens when they rent to those type of people. I know it was a rhetorical question, Pete, but I'm glad that you asked because some people really want to know, right? So maybe they'll rent to a lighter complexion African American male who may be well polished, put together, working professional, maybe a lawyer or something like that. But then when a dark-skinned guy comes in to rent, same credit, same income, but just looks a little differently, not put together quite the same. They may say, well, I would prefer the lighter complexion professional male versus the thug looking male. That's discrimination. And so that is a great question. Although it was rhetorical for you, Pete, because I know that you're in the industry, somebody needed to hear that because people need to understand that you can accidentally discriminate. It doesn't have to be on purpose. All right, so I'm going to go to the next one. All right, so people cannot be discriminated because of their religion. All right, so if a person is Muslim or Christian or atheist, Jehovah's Witness, whatever, the laws protect tenants. All right, you cannot discriminate as a landlord. You cannot. Okay, so here's the thing. All right, so let's say someone who is an atheist comes into the office, contacts you, want to rent your property, and maybe you're a Christian and you have strong Christian values and beliefs. I get it. I'm a Christian as well. I'm a believer, right? But in the business, it's business. The business is not church. So your ideas and what you think about that person and their religion, their faith has nothing to do with you running your business. So treat it like a business and mind your business. Okay. So if they're atheists and maybe they come into the office, they see your Christian pictures and your so in my office, I always have like these positive quotes and motivations. And that's just who I am as a person. Right. So every day is a good day for me, right? I'm like, happy Monday, happy Tuesday. And sometimes that pisses people off because they don't wake up on the good side of the bed, right? And not that I always wake up on the good side of the bed, but I always declare and decree that I'm going to have a good day because what we think we become, right? And so let's just say an atheist comes into the office. They see your Christian information, maybe on the walls, maybe you're playing Christian music in the background, whatever, right? And they realize, oh, maybe they're Christian, and they may say something to offend you in your faith, to say something like, oh, so you're so-called Christian, huh? There's no God. You cannot discriminate. You cannot deny that person from renting your property because of their religion, because of their belief. So if it's a Jehovah's Witness, if it's a Christian, whatever, you have to treat everybody the same. Must treat everybody the same. So here's the thing. I'm going to give an example. Then I'm going to come back to the comments. There was a situation where in a community, it was a diverse community, the manager allowed the Christians to rent the community room, but didn't allow another religion or faith to rent the community room. That's discrimination. So if you're going to allow somebody to use the facility, you have to make sure that it's available for everybody. All right. So the next one is sex. You cannot discriminate because the person is a male or a female. All right. And so just recently here in 2021, I know that President Biden has added some language, or they're looking at the transgenders, okay, and making sure that they're protected as well. So as of right now, I don't know where they are with making sure that it's covered under the law, but just know and be on the lookout that it's coming. So LGBTQ community, I'm sorry if I didn't get it right. I don't know it. But they will be protected as well. So transgenders, they'll fall under that sex. All right. You cannot discriminate. You can't say, oh, I don't want a male, or I don't want a female. I don't want a single female in the community. You cannot discriminate. It's against the law. The next one is disability. People who have disabilities. Here is Pete. You ask, how do you accidentally discriminate? All right. So a disability is someone who is disabled physically or mentally. Sometimes a disability may not be a physical thing that you can see. All right. So according to the doctors, I have a disability, but you can't tell just looking at me. Right. And if you have a participant, a prospect, a tenant, whoever that comes to you and they tell you that they are disabled, by law, you cannot ask them what their disability is. That is a violation of fair housing laws. All right. And so although you may mean well, that's a situation where you absolutely cannot ask. You cannot ask them, well, how are you disabled? I don't see a disability, because everybody that's disabled don't have a wheelchair. I walk, listen, I ride my motorcycle, but according to the doctors, I have a disability. Right. So it's an impairment that, like I said, it may be physical or it may be mental. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. All right. So let me go to the comments and then I'm going to come back to this. All right. Sissy, you said, can they ask what religion you are on an application? Great question. You cannot. Landlords cannot ask that information on an application. Please do not ask anybody what their religion is. That is a violation of fair housing laws. And so if you know someone who has it on their application, go ahead and tell them that you tuned in today. Landlord and tenant coach Karissa said to take it off your application unless you want to get sued. I promise you, it'll keep you off the hot seat. Hey, Keith Childs, thank you so much for tuning in, partner. He's a good one that will trip you up. You cannot discriminate against pets. Absolutely. Well, you said pets. All right. So Keith, we will come back to revisit that, but pets is not fair housing. It's not covered under fair housing. So we'll get back to that. All right, Valerie, you said apartments are discriminating because of income. All right. That's really what's going on, because of income. Lauren, can you ask if they would require adjustments to the property? That is a good question. So are you talking about from the landlord perspective or the tenant perspective? Because so here's the thing. If a person who has a disability and maybe they need some sort of apparatus or equipment to function normally, then yes, tenants can ask landlords to make those improvements to make sure that the tenant can live to the best of their ability at a normal level. Now, here's the thing. And I give this example quite often. So let's say, for instance, there is someone who is in a handicap accessible unit, right? However, in the bathroom, there is no grab bar. So a grab bar is what they hold on to when they either trying to get in or out of the tub or the shower. Usually it's a tub that the wheelchair can roll into, but in some cases it may not have that type of setup. So in that situation, the tenant reaches out to the landlord to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I am asking that you install a grab bar. Okay, so the landlord can basically go ahead and install the grab bar. Now, let's just hypothetically say the tenant doesn't want the normal or the standard grab bar that you find at Home Depot, Lowe's, or whatever your local home improvement store is. Maybe they want a grab bar that's blinged out with Swarovski crystals and, got Bluetooth speakers in it. And this grab bar costs $1,000 versus the standard grab bar that may cost like $40-50. So if it creates a financial hardship for the landlord does have a right to allow the tenant to bear the cost of installing whatever is necessary. So yeah, tenants can ask, but landlords, as long as it's not creating a financial hardship, landlords should make those changes. Okay. They do have to alter. Yes, that's true, Sissy. They have to alter the apartment to accommodate those who are physically disabled. Absolutely. Keith, you said if someone have a service animal, you cannot discriminate against what kind of pet they need for the said service. That's a good point. So I'm going to cover that in one of the upcoming weeks. But tonight we're just going to discuss the 7 protected classes, but that's absolutely right. I'm going to talk a lot more about service animals, assisted animals, and pets. What's the difference? So make sure you are tuning in for the whole month of April. Come back every Monday for the whole month of April. Pete, you said BSL will be an example of the decision on pets, but doesn't fall under the Discrimination Act. Okay, let me go to Lauren. Would that question be part of the application process or move-in inspection discussion? That's a great question, Lauren. And so if a tenant, okay, so let me just use me as an example. If I see someone that in my natural eye maybe appear to be disabled, I may ask, are there any special requests or accommodations that we can provide in leasing up or renting in our community? Now, landlords can put that question on their application as long as it's a standard question, right? But notice I never said, are you disabled? I'm asking, are there any accommodations that you may need in order to, lease up in the rental community? Do not ask. Make sure that nobody's asking about the disability specifically, but you can ask about any accommodations that may be required. So here's the thing. I'm going to give an example. Here is a good example of discrimination unintentionally, Pete. Let's say, for instance, true story. In Prince George's County, there was a prospect who was interested in renting an apartment. In that apartment community, there were several apartments available. Okay. Now, the person, when they called over the phone, they told the landlord, hey, I would like to come and look at a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. I'm in a wheelchair. My sister's going to be bringing me. So they got to the property. They went into the rent office. And when they got there, originally they did have an apartment on the first floor. Okay. It wasn't handicap accessible, but it was on the first floor. So that leasing consultant thought that he was doing the right thing by telling that person that they, instead of saying we have other apartments available on the second floor, he just flat out said, we don't have any more apartments available, because he thought that that prospect only wanted something on the first floor. So here's the thing. You can't make a decision for people in wheelchairs. And although he meant well, fair housing laws prevent that type of behavior. So what he was supposed to have done was to tell that person in the wheelchair, we have 2 or 3 apartments available. and let them know where the apartment was and allow that prospect or the applicant to make the decision whether or not they wanted to rent that place. Listen, in one of my rental communities that I manage, true story. I promise you, when I first started managing property in that community, I was just kind of in awe because there was a couple. They had 3 kids. Wife, she went to school. She didn't work. The husband was in a wheelchair. The wife picked the husband up every day and took the husband up and down the steps. They lived on the top floor. All right. 3-story apartment building. They lived on the top floor. The wife every day took her husband up and down the steps. I don't know how she did it. She was small. She was a small frame young lady, and people do it. So you cannot discriminate. You can't make the decision. You just can't do it. All right, Pete, you said I've never seen a grab bar like that. Listen, people will do some crazy things. People like what they like, okay? All right. And Pete, you said you love story time. Great. All right, so let me get back to the next protected class. I said I'm not going to hold you long. And so make sure that you're tuning in next week because I'm going to come back and share some more information. All right, so the next thing is familial status. Families, people with children, same-sex marriage. You cannot discriminate because people have children. You cannot discriminate or steer people. So I'm going to use families, for instance. All right. At one point in time, I had a blended family. I was happily married, and my family size was the size of 8 people. 8 people literally lived in my house. Me, my husband, my 4 kids, and his 2 brothers. All right. So before I bought my house, we were looking at renting, and we went to one community. Now I had good credit, right? I'm just trying to get a bigger place. I wasn't really sure which area or community I wanted us to purchase a house in because I wanted to get a feel for different communities, look at schools, because I'm big on education and having quality education. So me with my good credit self, I go to a rental community. They see us getting out the truck. And like I said, it's 8 of us. So you got 2 adults and 6 kids. They denied me. They denied the application for us to rent. We would not have over occupied the unit. We could obviously afford the unit. It just wasn't worth me fighting and going through all of that. So instead of renting, I said, you know what, let's just go ahead and buy a house. And so, but you cannot discriminate because people have children. Now, if people, as landlords, if you have prospects, if you have applicants that come to you, and let's say they come into the office, then let me paint the picture. They come into the office. It's been a long day for the kids. All right. I'm a mother. All right. I get it. I'm a grandmother. I get it. Right. As a matter of fact, I have 7 grandkids. Okay. So it's been a long day. The kids are off the chain. Maybe the children are not as disciplined as you would like for them to be, or maybe as disciplined as people that you know. All right. The kids, they come in, they're tired, they're screaming, they're running around, they're yelling, they got chocolate all over their hands, and they touching the walls, they touching stuff in the apartment, they touching the doorknobs, they running up and down the steps in the house, and they just going buck wild. And all this time, the mother or the guardian, whoever the adult is, hasn't said a word. All right. So we talk about multiple kids. It's kind of all over the place. And in your mind, maybe you get this picture like, oh my God, if I let them rent this place, they're going to tear this place up. We don't want that. That's discrimination. Okay. You definitely don't want to discriminate because people have families. All right. Families need a roof over their head, just as I do. Okay. Let me touch on same-sex marriage. I had a student some years ago. She shared her story, how she was going to look at a rental property. She called. She was very professional, very polite. And she called the landlord to say, hey, I saw your ad. I'm interested in renting your property. I would like to schedule an appointment to come and see it. So the landlord, housing provider, scheduled the appointment. She got there. So she got out the car and met the landlord at the door. The landlord was like, oh, I've been waiting on you. Let's go in. So she said, well, let me go and get my significant other. I'll be right back. So she went to the car. She got her wife Okay. Came right back, went to the door, and all of a sudden, this landlord remember, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I just remember we leased this apartment up earlier today. I'm so sorry. Cannot discriminate because same sex. All right. Familial status, not because they're married, but because it's just you can't do it. All right. So let me touch on one more. Then I'm going to give a couple of visual examples. All right. And if you're tuning in from YouTube, thank you so much. If you're tuning in from Facebook, like my page, subscribe to my YouTube channel. National origin is the next one I want to cover. All right. The actual or perceived place of birth, country of origin, ancestry, native language, accent, which sometimes I try to prevent y'all from hearing my little Southern country belle accent, or because they are perceived as looking or sounding foreign. You cannot discriminate. I don't care if you don't understand their language, that there may be a language barrier. Sometimes people who are not from your area may have an accent. Okay, you cannot discriminate. Even if you don't understand their language, please do not humiliate them. Please don't disrespect them. True story. I've had a person who was a leasing consultant, and a prospect came into the office, spoke. They were, I think they were Hispanic or something like that, but they had very limited English ability to speak, right? And so the leasing consultant got so frustrated, and instead of trying to get an interpreter, they talk slowly. And when you do that, although you might mean well, that's offensive, right? So to have a person that's in your office and you don't understand them very well, they don't understand you, and you talk slower as if they're still going to understand. If they don't understand English, whether you talk fast like I do when I get excited, or you talk extra slow, or you talk louder, it's not going to help them understand English, right? So please don't offend people. All right. So you cannot discriminate for those reasons. Those are 7 protected classes. Pete, you're right. That's terrible. And it is absolutely disrespectful. And sometimes people really mean well, Pete. I know. I get it. I see it all the time. But this is why I teach. This is why I share this information. All right. So let me bring up a picture because I want you to see what it looks like. All right. So I talked about the same sex, right? I talked about the couple who was married. This is what it looks like. You just can't do it. It just doesn't work. Right? So I just want you guys to know this information. And like I said, each and every Monday for the remainder of April, right here on my Facebook or YouTube page, I'm going to be sharing more information. So please make sure that you are connected with me. If you have questions, please go ahead and drop it in the comment box. If you have questions, even if I'm not on live, go ahead and inbox me and I will definitely follow up. This is what I do each and every Monday, right here at 7:30 p.m. I do thank you so much for joining me today. And again, please subscribe to that YouTube channel. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell so that when I upload videos, you will be the first to get the information. And I just want to say thank you so much. Pete, I know that you picked up a copy of my book. I just want to say thank you so much for those of you who have purchased my book. I do have a book that I recently published on Amazon. It's called The Inspired Life. So stay tuned because I'm going to have a book sign and release party where I'll be autographing your books and your journals. And then also by way of announcement, I'm going to do a 7-day challenge starting May 3rd. So for those of you who do have the journal, for those of you who do have my book, I'm going to do a 7-day challenge starting May 3rd. So on May 10th, we're going to come back and a lucky winner is going to win $100, but you have to have the book. So if you have the book, you're already in the drawing. Okay. But I'll share more about that as the time draws a lot closer to that date. Thank you so much, Pete, for your support. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for showing up each and every week. I do appreciate you tuning in. If you find this information is helpful, please share it with others, right? Share it with your friends, your family, your loved ones. Heck, share it with your enemies. Maybe they might need some help and encouragement. And again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. My time is up, and I definitely thank you for yours. I'm Karissa. I'll see you all next week. So that's it. Bye for now. Unless you have any other questions. Are there any other last-minute questions? Any other last-minute questions, comments, remarks, or observations? All right. If there are no more comments, no more questions, remarks, or observations, I will see you all next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.